Hello, everybody, and welcome today to our live stream here with my friend Nate Spears. Nate, it's so good to have you on with me this afternoon. I'm super excited to do this session with you, and we'll come back around to you, Nate. I want to, introduce the audience to you and make sure that everybody gets to know you super well. But before we do that, just a few quick housekeeping items. First of all, we will have an open Q&A session at the end here of the live stream, and so feel free to start posting your questions in whatever social media platform you are currently on. We will do our best to keep an eye on those and to address those. If they're applicable, we might address them during our conversation. If not, we'll save them towards the end and try to get to all of those that we possibly can. My name is Earl Foote. I am founder and CEO of Nexus IT. Nexus IT is a white glove IT support, cybersecurity, and cloud firm based here in Salt Lake City, Utah. I'm joined here with my friend Nate Spears, co-founder of ClearSource. Nate and I have known each other for a number of years and have gotten to know each other better as time has gone on. And it's interesting how our leadership journeys have been very similar. And Nate and myself and some of the other collaborators that have done these sessions with me, we have essentially, we've all kind of had maybe some rough patches in our journeys as entrepreneurs or leaders, and we're grateful to good mentors and good people out there who took us under their wings and kind of helped us learn some of the ropes. Not that they're, obviously learning is a lifelong pursuit, and certainly Nate and I have not arrived at any sort of, massive pinnacles. It's a continual journey, right, Nate?
Absolutely.
So anyways, we're just, we like to do these sessions to kind of give back to the community, share some ideas, see what resonates, and hopefully there's some ideas that help other, entrepreneurs and leaders in the community to find more success in what they do. So let me introduce Nate. Nate, your official bio, here we go, is Nate was, and this is really interesting, by the way, you're going to want to tune in and listen to this because Nate has a very interesting background. So Nate was raised in the swamplands and marshes of southeastern Georgia. He was homeschooled. He spent his days exploring the natural world and evenings doing door-to-door sales with his dad. As early as the age of 8, Nate was learning how to sell everything from encyclopedias to long-distance telephone services. When he was 16, Nate and his younger siblings moved with their mom to Cedar City, Utah. After school, Nate worked a full-time job as an outbound call center telemarketer. With 8 years of outbound sales and inbound customer service, he got into vendor operations management with American Express while studying economics at the University of Utah. Upon graduating, Nate landed at BMW Bank. While earning his MBA, Nate was managing the outsourcing of customer service for the BMW Visa signature card to third-party call centers. It was during this time at BMW that Nate and his colleague, Rob Goyer, had a realization. The big players in the call center space were only focused on efficiency, not quality. There must be an opportunity in the outsourced customer service industry for a company to create the BMW customer experience for any company. It was with this vision that Nate and Rob launched ClearSource in 2008. ClearSource provides premium customer care services, phone, chat, email support, as well as other back office functions on behalf of other companies. This experience was eye-opening. Nate had never before had direct reports at any point in his corporate career, and his MBA hardly prepared him to build a large organization. This lack of managerial experience kept the realization of ClearSource's potential out of reach for nearly a decade. Despite being recognized as an Inc. 500 company in 2015, 2016, and 2017, Nate is able to recount several times before, during, and after this period of intense growth when he thought ClearSource was going to go out of business. And I can attest as a fellow entrepreneur that sometimes when things all look rosy on the outside, you're on the verge of just, one bad check, right? That might close the doors. So let's see here. These fast fail experiences pushed Nate to learn the skills he wasn't taught in school. His employees generally viewed call center work as a life-sucking, monotonous slog. He had to figure out how to teach these people to love their jobs through self-study. Nate became a student of today's thought leaders, Simon Sinek, Brene Brown, Patrick Leoncinelli, Tim Collins, and others. Nate even gave himself a promotion. He once made himself the team leader of 10 customer service reps for 6 months so that he could experience whether the leadership ideas he had read about would work in the real world. These days, his company is on much stronger footing with nearly 400 employees spread across Utah and abroad. Nate is able to spend the majority of his time doing what he loves most, teaching leaders in his organization how to create exceptional customer experiences for the people they lead. Nate has developed a 12-week leadership training program to teach the principles of healthy accountability and stewardship. The result, lower rates of attrition, more discretionary effort, fewer headaches, and happier clients. When Nate isn't evangelizing the principles of healthy leadership, he's practicing self-care by spending time with his wife and 3 children, road cycling, trail running, snowboarding, and of course, reading leadership books. So, Nate, welcome here today. You and I have had a few conversations, and I know we had a bit of a conversation about this journey of like being thrust into a leadership role when you really have no right to be there, and probably don't have the adequate experience to be there. And so I know that situation has led to much of your journey and who you are today as a leader, which honestly, one of the leaders who has the most depth in thought that I know of, and that is most willing. I mean, who appoints themselves as a team leader over 10 of their colleagues, and steps out of your COO role, to go and just test the inner workings and see, what's actually going to work and not. So tell us a little bit about that journey, if you would.
No, my pleasure. So first of all, Earl, thank you so much for the opportunity. I think for me, I'm thrilled just for the chance to share these principles with everybody. I'm a firm believer in the idea that there's no original ideas. A lot of this has come from not just my experience, but things I've read, and putting everything together into kind of a concise set of principles that I try and live by as a leader. But to piggyback on some of the information that you shared, yes, as you mentioned, prior to my experience with ClearSource, I had absolutely zero experience managing or leading other people in a direct report setting. Now, I'd spent 11 years in corporate America, and this is all before starting with Rob ClearSource back in 2008. We spent the first, of course, 2008, the beginning of the recession. We spent the first 2 years losing plenty of money, only to find myself in 2010 with not enough money to pay the rent and needing to go out and get a job, right? So I went back, got a job, spent another 3 years working in corporate America again, taking phone calls with current and prospective clients from the stairwell at work, and really just kind of getting through this, right? And so here, in 2013, we catch this big break, winning a big project that kind of brought us up to about 75, 80 employees. And I was able to leave my corporate job and go back to ClearSource full time. But I soon found myself in over my head, right? Because never at any point during these 14 years of corporate America experience did I have direct reports. I had not supervised anybody. I hadn't managed anybody. I wasn't responsible for anything, right? So here I was just kind of floundering in this role, not getting the kind of performance that we were looking for. It's very common in this outsourced customer service industry for people to kind of give a minimum level of effort to get by. And if for whatever reason they decide they don't like the job, then they just ghost you, right? They stop showing up. And the tendency as a new leader with no tools is to lead with your 2 favorite weapons, which I call carrots and sticks, right? The promises of incentives and the threats of punishment up to and including termination. And so, not knowing any better, there I was, right? Carrots and sticks all day long. And this continued for some time. I was miserable. My people were miserable. We weren't getting results. A really painful experience for me was I had hired someone with a lot of industry experience at a high level in the company. And I spent the first year kind of hoping that he would, in a sense, it sounds foolish in hindsight, but be able to read my mind and understand exactly what he was supposed to do in the role. And I really didn't even go over his job description with him until he'd been on the job for a year, right? So at this point, we're kind of dissatisfied with the performance. We pull out the job description, and yeah, he's doing the 2 or 3 things that he's really good at and loves to do, but there's another 3 or 4 things on the job description that he's not touching. And so we raised the issue in an effort to improve performance. And after a couple of weeks, we're not where we need to be, of course. And so I fired him. And I feel terrible about it. I feel terrible about it now. I feel terrible that we don't have the friendship that we did. And I continue to make these kinds of mistakes. And this continued until 3 years ago. It was December of 2017 that I was interviewing a woman for a training manager role with ClearSource. She came in very qualified, overqualified, had a PhD, master's, executive to director level positions at various organizations. And I was shocked even that she was having a conversation with me. She said something in the job description and the way that I'd written intrigued her. And so she wanted to learn more about who we were. And we're having this conversation. And she said something that I'll never forget. She said, "Nate, I was recently thinking about my career, all the people that I've led and managed over the years, mentored. And she said to me, you know, I've been successful, right? I've had great positions, a PhD. She said, but when I think about how those people that I mentored have gone on and done great things, right? Become director level or other positions, they've gone on to accomplish great things in their career. She said, that gives me more pride and fulfillment than anything that I accomplished on my own, right? Than any of my educational or other career accomplishments. And for me, the reason that hit me like a ton of bricks is because I felt guilty as charged. And I'll tell you why. Here I was wrapping up 2017. And that year, Earl, we had a 100% rate of attrition, 100% turnover, okay? And nearly half of those were people that we'd fired, right? And I thought to myself, what is going on? This is crazy. Not only is it expensive, but here I am investing all of this emotional energy into getting to know people, caring about them, only to see them fail and then me fire them as a result. And I thought, something has got to change. And it was shortly thereafter that I really started reading Simon Sinek, Brene Brown, Jim Collins' Good to Great, and other books that kind of put me on a path to move forward to solving some of these challenges.
Very cool, Nate. Well, thank you so much for setting the stage. So many really good points there and very interesting things. For me, I really like the carrots and sticks. That's fantastic. And it's so true. And it's if you self-analyze and you realize that that's the way you're leading, you need to change something because it's not a proper way to lead. I think it's really interesting to hear your entrepreneurial journey, and so often I think, particularly with budding entrepreneurs or just people from outside of the entrepreneurial community, as they gaze in, they think it's all red carpets and rose-colored glasses and it's fame and fortune. And the reality is that for so many of us, particularly in those early years, it's feast and famine, and it's rarely feast. It's mostly famine, and there's a lot of difficult challenges and difficult times. And so, hearing your story of like starting a company and then stepping back out of that company, right, and taking a job so you can support your family until the revenue comes back to a point where you can come back in. I mean, those are the untold stories that people just don't think about sometimes or don't understand that those exist. when you're dealing with entrepreneurship. You talked about the leadership mistakes and not really training or defining expectations until a year into somebody's tenure with you, and those things stick with you. Like when you realize it's me, it's my fault, right? I could have done something different here. And granted, it doesn't mean that every leader 100% of everything is their fault, right? I mean, sometimes it's the team member, their attitude, their work ethic, their dedication, whatever it might be. But when as a leader, and I know, you've read the book Extreme Leadership by Jocko Willink. Yeah, and that's one of those situations where really you have to ask yourself, have I really done everything in my power to make this situation successful? And if I have, then great. I've done the right things, and I can kind of wash my hands and do what's necessary with the situation, right? But if I haven't, what have I done wrong? How can I change that? And those things stick with you. 2017, 100% rate of attrition. That's massive, really big. And certainly I think for any entrepreneur would raise some questions, would make you ask, what the heck is going on, and why is this happening, and how do we fix it? And so really it's been, in recent years, you've had this very interesting journey. And so let's talk a little bit about some of the things you've learned over the last few years and what you've created in your company. So I know that you've worked really hard to create a culture of what you call positive accountability. Tell us a little bit about what that means to you and your organization, and what others might learn from it.
Sure thing. So going back to that concept of extreme ownership, there's a really great book that I love called The Outward Mindset, and it's written by the Arbinger Institute. And in that book, there's this line that I try and live by. And the line goes, as far as I'm concerned, the problem is me. And the way that I interpret that is that when something's not going the way that I hoped it would, or an unmet expectation is creating frustration, or I'm having conflict with someone, I've got two options. There are two paths I can take. One, I can sit around and twiddle my thumbs and wait, right, for them to change. Or I can take the power back, right? Because in that first scenario, I'm relatively helpless. I can take the power back and say, what do I need to do differently? I can only control me. I can't control this other person. What do I need to do differently in order to affect a better outcome? Okay. And adopting this mindset is what started to allow me to stop blaming employees for the things that they were doing that ultimately led to me terminating them or them resigning or whatever else, right? Like at the end of the day, I had two options. I could continue to threaten people, and of course, anyone with a gun to their head will do what you ask for as long as that gun is there. But ultimately, once you take it away, then they leave and they never come back, right? And so I found really quickly that threats of termination and other things didn't help. And so the question is, what did I need to do differently? The first step before we get into accountability really is we had to start seeing our staff as people, not as objects. And I would say in our industry in particular, there's a very strong paradigm of looking at entry-level customer service representatives as production machines. And only by becoming willing to see them as people and not as objects, was I going to be able to go down the path of deciding, okay, I recognize that in this industry, we don't have a lot of trust between people and management. How can I be the first one to extend that trust, recognizing that, rather than simply waiting for people to earn my trust? What policies do we have that send the message to our people that they are objects? A good example of this is an attendance policy, right? I don't know, Earl, if you hold yourself to a strict attendance policy at Nexus IT. I don't personally have a strict attendance policy. I work hard because I love my work, right? But then when I think about a strict attendance policy that says if you miss work 3 times in a month, then I'm going to fire you, what does that say to that individual, right? It says you're an object. And so taking a step back and looking at some of those messages, and we found our organization was rife with that kind of messaging. Okay, so number one. Number two, there was a clear lack of accountability, right? And at the heart of accountability is creating and enforcing a strong set of expectations. Okay, and it's not expectations like, this is what I expect of you, do it or else. It's just simply that if there's something someone needs to do in order to help the organization achieve its strategic objectives, then that needs to be clearly defined. And there can be no ambiguity around that, right? And so when someone comes into organization, oftentimes we have these assumed expectations, right? It's like, hey, you read the job description, you're cashing the paycheck, then that must mean that you're signing up for doing everything that I ask you to do. But that's not enough, right? When someone comes on, right, we've got to reinforce those expectations through a process of accountability. I was reading Crucial Accountability, which is by the same guys that wrote Crucial Conversations, and they gave the perfect definition of accountability. They said that accountability is a positive term that simply describes whether in the eyes of others we've kept our commitments, or I like to say, whether in the eyes of others we've done what we said we would do. Okay. Now, that's a two-sided coin, meaning if ultimately someone does do what they said they would, then accountability demands that I praise, appreciate, and recognize their keeping of that commitment. Okay, this is critical, right? One of the things I love that one of my favorite authors, Dan Pink, recently shared, I saw it on a Facebook post. He said, don't praise the person, praise the process, right? It's not, hey, you always do a great job. It's when you did this, right? That was awesome and I loved it, and here's how it contributed to helping the company be successful. And so we praise, appreciate, and recognize the keeping of commitments, okay? So the next question is what happens when somebody is not keeping their commitments? They're not doing what they said they would do, okay? Now, this is where, in the absence of true leadership principles, we tend to resort to carrots and sticks. And so I say instead, let's be curious, right? I start to say, man, well, why didn't they do the thing? And one way that I do that is by having a conversation with them where I say, in a kind of non-confrontational way, I want to give them the benefit of the doubt. And I say, tell me what got in the way, right? You said you would do this, and this is when you said you'd do it by, and you didn't do it. So tell me what got in the way, right? That's my opportunity to root cause whatever it was, whatever the reason was. And there's only three potential root causes. One or a combination of these three. It's either the person doesn't know how to do it, they don't want to do it, or they don't have the ability or capacity to do it, okay? And the remedy is going to be different for each of those three things, but it's very critical that we not take that first response, that we really dig in and say, okay, well, why is that? Okay, so this, okay, then why is that? And you get down until you're absolutely satisfied that you know whether it's because they didn't want to do it, they didn't know how to do it, or they didn't have the ability or capacity to do it, okay? The next step is help them to come up with a plan to recommit and do the thing, whether that's they need additional training, whether that's helping them understand why what they committed to do is actually going to benefit them in the long run, or changing something that will enable them to have the capacity to do the thing. And then the question becomes, how then, now that you have developed a plan, how can I as your leader help you carry out that plan? And I found that when accountability is practiced in that healthy way, right, that at the end of the day, we start creating an expectation that everyone can rely on. We know this is what's going to happen. And I reinforce that expectation through follow-up, right? It's kind of like if I ask my son to go clean his bedroom, and he goes and he does it, and he comes back downstairs and he says, all right, Dad, I did it, but I'm in the middle of watching a great TV show. And I say, great, thank you, right? And I keep watching my show, then he's probably not very likely to respond to that request to clean his room again the next time, right? But if instead I pause that movie and I go upstairs and I walk with him and admire his newly cleaned room and tell him, hey, great job, let's go get ice cream, right? That then reinforces that expectation in a positive way where the praise, appreciation, and recognition is for the job well done. And I think it means a lot more in the long run when you can engage people that way and really just drive up discretionary effort.
Nate, so many amazing, great points there. Absolutely fantastic. Thank you. Just a wealth of knowledge and really, really great ideas. I want to key on just a couple of things. So this concept of seeing people as people is super, super important. And in fact, one of my good friends, Dr. Jeb Hurley, who is co-founder CEO of Xmetrics. In fact, he'll be on this session with me in January. For Dr. Jeb, everything boils down to trust, to a lack of it, or very healthy teams thriving because of a significant amount of trust, particularly among leadership and between leadership and those they lead. And I think it's absolutely fascinating and super important. You've keyed in on this, this principle that if you aren't fostering, and in every way, in your language, your actions, your body language, your written language, which are all of your policies and procedures and documents and manuals and all that kind of stuff, if you're not fostering trust, you're probably thwarting your own relationship with that person on your team, and therefore likely diminishing the effort that they're giving to what you're asking them to do day in and day out. So I really like this. And by the way, everybody's really enjoying the topic and the discussion here. Lots of really great comments so far. So let's transition into a little bit of a different topic here. I really like this one. It's thought-provoking. And that is measuring and defining KPIs that your clients care about. So I think generally when leadership teams sit in the boardroom, or they sit down with the board, they think about, what do we want to achieve as a company? What metrics do we need to push to get there? And let's create those metrics. And so usually that is around revenue, and it's around profit, and other numbers that get thrown in there. But the reality is, do your clients really care about that, right?
Yeah.
To some extent they might, because they want you to be a healthy, thriving partner. But those specific items they probably don't care much about. So let's talk about this idea of creating KPIs that your clients actually care about. Why is it important? Who cares? Go ahead.
Absolutely. So my business partner has this saying, and he says, don't ever be a hammer looking for a nail. Okay. And what he means by that is, don't be a solution looking for a problem to solve. What I take away from that is that it's absolutely critical that we understand what problem it is that we solve, and that we do that well. Our organizational goals are threefold. First, and most important, we've got to have happy clients, which means doing everything we can to ensure that they feel that we're creating value. And I want to tell you why I say feel that we're creating value. In a KPI conversation, you're going to say, Nate, that sounds a little squishy, and I agree with you, it does. But let me explain. Simon Sinek teaches that we make our decisions first emotionally, and then we justify them with facts, figures, rationale, features, benefits, etc. The reality is that our clients do business with us because they like us and they want to do business with us. Okay. Now, of course, we've got to adhere to the contractual obligations and make sure that we're exceeding all the expectations and other targets we've been given. But first and foremost, I've got to make sure that that emotional checkbox is checked so that we can continue to do business together. So first and foremost, happy clients. That for us means ensuring that their customers are thrilled with the service that we're providing as an outsourced service provider. Our second collective goal is healthy financials. We've got to make sure that as a company, we are on a good financial footing. Obviously, if we go out of business, if we lose money, we go out of business. And then the third thing, ensuring that our staff feel successful, that they are providing discretionary effort. I'm not going to tell the whole story, but if you ever read The Art of Significance by Dan Clark, he tells the story of the 38-inch vertical and the broomstick. I love that story. It's a great example of giving discretionary effort. And so when I think about that threefold goal, right? happy client, healthy financials, successful staff. Then it's going through and identifying how everybody in the organization plays a role in achieving that collective goal. And we call that a role definition. Okay. So the role definition is answered by 3 questions. Why in the world would we hire someone for this position? Why does the position exist? The second question is, what are the core responsibilities of this role? And the third is, what are the KPIs that tell someone who's evaluating your performance whether you're successful or not? Okay. Now, we define KPIs in 2 terms. One, we have behavioral KPIs, which are KPIs over which I have nearly complete control, right? They're things that I either did or didn't do. Showing up for work would be a great example of a behavioral KPI. A results KPI is something that I hope will be obtained through my efforts, but over which I may not have 100% total control. And so a good example of that might be if on a given team, an individual team member is held accountable for the behavioral KPI of attendance, their team leader might be responsible for attendance across the team. That'd be a good example of a results KPI. And so transitioning then now to what our clients want. When we define KPIs, they meet that SMART goal setting acronym, right? Specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, time bound. And so when we carry that over to KPIs, we always look, is this something that's black and white? It can be measured. We can identify whether we're hitting the KPI or not hitting the KPI. And is it clear to everybody, right? We want high visibility and transparency. So then what we do is we make sure that we're in alignment with what our client is looking for in terms of performance. One of the biggest challenges in our business is we are in a service industry focused on customer satisfaction, which is in and of itself measurable. But how do you identify the long-term impact of a happy customer on the financials of, for the client, right? And so for us, we've looked at other things, like you look at average speed of answer, or you look at how long the customer has to be on the phone with an agent, right? Are we wasting their time, or are we minimizing their time and effort? We look at how many times they had to call in order to get their issue resolved. And we look at all of these different metrics as a way to quantify the value that we're creating for our customer. Now, it's not just customer satisfaction, right? I could go and give away a bunch of money or product to every customer who calls in, and they would probably end the call satisfied, but our client wouldn't be very happy, right? So I've got to make sure that I'm delivering that service in a way that they say, yep, this is exactly what I'm looking for. I love working with you guys. That feels good. Because we know that loyalty is rooted in emotion. That emotion is, how do I feel about myself when I'm doing business with ClearSource, right? And so we've got to make sure that we're checking that box.
Super great, Nate. It's so interesting how many parallels there are between our philosophies and our entrepreneurial journey. So at Nexus IT, our culture actually revolves around basically the same 3 principles that you've expressed. I think the verbiage is slightly different, but I think you're more eloquent at explaining those. For us, really what that is the 3 pillars of our organization and the 3 entities that we serve are, number 1, to make sure that our clientele have an extraordinary experience, that they're so thrilled that they want to talk about it, right? They're so thrilled that they want to go leave a Google review because, and they, oftentimes they do, which is, testament to our team. Second is that our team has an extraordinary experience, that they feel fantastic about, the role that they execute day in and day out, that they feel like they're making a meaningful impact, that they're doing something important, and that they're enjoying the collaboration with their team, they're enjoying the collaboration with leadership and everything else, and that they're fulfilled in their career and they have a career path in front of them. Finally is the organization. You mentioned, your company has to be financially viable, and at the root of it, when you're competing for business, a lot of businesses want to beat you up over price, right? And the reality is that for me, really wise leaders understand and know that their partners in their businesses, they have to be financially viable organizations, and they have to make a profit. They cannot continue to be a great partner to you if they can't reinvest into their business and into their team and into their products and services, right? And so those are three really, really important points that I like out of here. And I just want to, say it's interesting that for me, this was also a journey of learning and understanding this concept that the client doesn't necessarily care about the KPIs that you set in the boardroom, right? And if you lead with the KPIs that are important to us, which we, I guess several years ago had a bit of an epiphany, and finally understood this point, and therefore we created an incentive program for our team members. Now here's a carrot, right? But sometimes I think that there's good use of carrots, and sometimes you got to use a stick, but it's certainly not your only two tools in your tool bag. But for us, once we figured out those KPIs that really matter to our clients, which is ticket response times, ticket resolution times, first time resolution, 100% satisfaction from that client. And we started to incentivize our client service delivery teams based upon those KPIs. That's when we had a transformational experience. Yeah. That's when our clients, the service delivery really started to resonate with them, and therefore the financial viability of the company and the experience of the team began to improve, right? And so I think you can't underestimate this this thought of understand what it is that really matters to your client. Go talk to them, right? Yeah. Go sit down with them and ask them what really matters to you, and figure out how to measure it, and figure out how to make your team accountable. Now, there might be other mechanisms. We use an incentive. Every month our team gets incentives based upon the metrics that that they need to hit to make sure our clients are satisfied. Yeah. But there are other methods that others use. So let's see.
I just want to interject. I've got something I'm burning to say about incentives real quick. So when I think of carrots and sticks, when I think of carrots, I think of the analogy of somebody sitting on the horse, and they've got what looks like a fishing pole, and down at the end of the string is a carrot dangling out in front of the horse, right? So the horse is walking toward the carrot, but of course, the more the horse walks, the carrot just keeps going further away, right? I've been in jobs where this illusion of promotion opportunities or great things that would come if I just did a really good job were shown to me, but they never became reality, right? It was always, if you do this, then you'll get that. And in his book, Dan Pink in Drive talks about the difference between what he calls if-then rewards and now-that rewards. Okay, if-then rewards are, I put out a bonus that says if everybody shows up for work on time for the rest of the month, I'm going to give you all $1,000. Okay, so everybody works really hard. They all show up for work on time at the end of the month. I hand them $1,000. They pat themselves on the back for doing a good job, right? And go and spend the money. And now that reward is completely different. And now that reward requires me to, as the leader, spend more time paying attention to the results, to the work being done by the team. Okay. And so as I see them working really hard and achieving great things, I go up to them and I say, you did such a great job with this. I want to recognize and appreciate that effort. Here's $1,000, right? Now, what's the difference between those two? In the first one, in the if-then reward, the employees pat themselves on the back for having done all the work to earn the reward. In the second one, they now look at their leader and they say, oh my gosh, they noticed. They paid attention to me, right? That means so much more than just the $1,000. And they're starting to say to themselves, I like this person. I want to be led by this person because they value me. They value my contribution. They care about me, right? At the end of the day, it cost me the same. I might have had to have spent a little more time and effort paying attention to the work being done by my people. But what then is the result, right? It's a huge trust builder and relationship builder if you want to earn discretionary effort. So incentives are absolutely critical when administered the right way. Couldn't agree more.
100%. Totally agree. And I think oftentimes leaders forget that reward and recognition are two very different things, right? And so many people are driven by recognition, even more so than reward. In my industry, you know, where we're dealing with technical engineers, the majority of them are driven by recognition more than they are so reward. You know, salespeople are going to be driven more by reward probably than recognition. But you have to begin to understand those personality types and individually understand those people, so you understand what resonates with them. And you can't cater, you know, every individual experience, you know, on every situation, but you have to start figuring out what sort of personalities and what drives your team, so that you can begin to build the programs that are going to work. And so recognition is super important. So let's do this. You know, I want to encourage the audience to start putting some Q&A into the platforms. We're going to keep an eye on those. I want to ask another question here, and we'll see. You know, maybe after this question, we'll get into some of those some of that Q&A. So, Nate, I know you have a philosophy that most organizations, their org chart is wrong. Tell me a little bit about that. Why is the org chart wrong, and what do you got to do to fix it?
You know, this stems from a conversation. I have interviewed a lot of people for promotions over the years, and I always say, okay, you're telling me you want to be a team leader or manager, or like, why do you want this position? And almost with this voice of desperation, people say, I just want to move up, you know? And I think, and I thought about that. And I thought, what is this concept of moving up? And we talk about it. We talk about rungs on the corporate ladder, right? We talk about people who are higher than me in the organization. And I think to myself, that must mean that where you see yourself is literally at the bottom, right? Nobody wants to be at the bottom. And in traditional org charts, I mean, we use terms like entry level, whatever it is, but there are these people who probably do the most work, right? But they're at the bottom. And that doesn't feel good. Going back to that concept earlier of treating people like people and not as objects. And so I thought to myself, if we could redesign the traditional pyramid-shaped org chart, where the person at the top has the biggest smiley face and the people at the bottom are wearing frowny faces, what would it look like, right? What would it be if we could see it completely differently? And what came to me was this concept of, we'll use an apple tree, okay? Where in this apple tree, as an owner and co-founder, I see myself in the root system, bringing in nutrients and moisture from the soil that represents our industry or the world around us. And my job is to nourish the trunk of the tree, which comprises all of our auxiliary functions like human resources, IT, workforce management, reporting, training, recruiting, et cetera. And then they support each of the big branches on the tree, which are our line of business managers, program managers. Their job is to support the smaller branches on the tree, which represent our team leaders, kind of our frontline supervisors, right? And then what do you have on the ends of the smallest branches? Of course, you have the apples. And when we think about where we sit in the organization, the tendency is to start to assume that people who are higher up, right, who have that title, that they're more important than we are. And so I like to ask the question, when we consider this metaphor of an apple tree, right, we say, which part of the tree is the most important? And I oftentimes get, well, it's the roots, right? If you didn't have the roots, the tree would die. And I say, okay, which part of the tree is the most valuable? The apples, definitely, right? In our organization, our frontline customer service representatives doing the work that generates the revenue, right? Clearly the most valuable. Nobody would plant an apple tree without the intent to harvest apples. So we go back to that other question. We say, which part of the tree could we do without and still produce apples? None of it, right? So at the end of the day, what we see there is that everybody has a role to play. Everybody's equally important. When we recognize that our goal, happy client, healthy financial, successful staff, help produce the biggest, reddest, juiciest, tastiest apples we possibly can, when we all recognize that that's our goal, then we get less hung up on who's getting promoted to what and why are they better than me, or all these other things that people really tend to focus on. And we start instead saying, wait a second, if I just do my job well, then we all benefit. We all benefit through job security. We all benefit through raises and bonuses and promotions and better amenities and better equipment and all the things that come with the company thriving financially, right? What that then leads to is an opportunity for each individual contributor to have their needs and wants met, whatever those might be, right? They're going to be different from person to person, but every single person comes to the organization wanting something, whether it's something they're working toward, whether it's something they're trying to create for themselves or their families, whether it's someone they are trying to become. And how do we help meet that need? It's through the collective benefits of the organization being successful, which only works well if everybody's rowing in the same direction. So the apple tree.
I love that. I love that metaphor. Fantastic, the apple tree, and that's something you could write a book on, Nate. You know, I've never really heard that metaphor, but it is so true and so applicable. So our friend Krista Casey asked a question here. She said, you spoke about the necessity of relationship with your clients who do business because they like you. How do you best encourage your employees who may be awesome at their skills but not as personable to transmit the same level of energy and love to your clientele? I know I have some thoughts, but let's hear yours first, Nate.
Certainly. Krista, great question. It's great to hear from you. So when I think about that, there's this one big kind of long-standing belief that we're not supposed to be friends with the people we lead, right? And I don't like that at all, because I feel like we are nothing if not people working together. And I feel that in order to build trust with the people that we lead, there absolutely have to be situations where we get to know each other. Her question, which is, how do we help people kind of develop that personability, kind of become someone that people like to do business with, right? I want to talk for just a moment about empathy and the role that it plays in building connection. And so we'll just kind of say that in the same way that we believe that some people are either incapable of or don't know how to show or express empathy, what we've identified is that the thing that's stopping them from expressing empathy is also the same thing that's stopping them from building connection, right? Which is that they're protecting themselves. And so what we look at first is, I say, what are the things that are happening or have happened in this person's life that are getting in the way of their ability to create connection, right? To be open and vulnerable, to be wholehearted. And we're really getting into, if you want like a master's class on this stuff, Brene Brown, I recommend The Power of Vulnerability, which is a fantastic seminar on audible.com. But ultimately, it's going in and identifying what are the things that are becoming an obstacle to connection, and how do we help get those things out of the way so that this person can then have the ability to create connection. What we found is that when someone is going through something especially painful in their life, it becomes very difficult for them to care about the needs of a customer, a coworker, a team leader, right? If I'm dealing with going through a divorce, or I just found out one of my parents has a terminal illness, or even my kid failing at school, any of those things can make things seem so difficult that it starts to become very hard for me to care about your situation. So helping to address those things, even though they're not work related, if there's anything we as their coworkers can do to help address those things, I think it goes a long way to kind of allowing them to feel safe and open up again. The second thing I would say is modeling. Modeling is critical. When I was a kid, I learned how to play the cello using the Suzuki Method. And in the Suzuki Method, they give you a CD with all of the songs that you're to learn, and they have you listen to the CD ad nauseum, 100, 500 times, so that you have this imprint on your brain of exactly how every song is supposed to go. When it comes time to play your instrument, what that allows you to do is, with not a lot of instruction, begin to self-correct, because you know how the notes are supposed to sound. Now, if you're learning cello, you know that the slightest movement up or down the string can create a different tone. And so we laugh when we watch kids playing terribly and everybody around them is covering their ears because, right, it's terrible to hear, but the kid's laughing because they don't know any better, right? And so ultimately, it's training that ear to understand this is what this is supposed to sound like. it's no different when it comes to creating those interpersonal relationships. Number one, it starts with a mindset that we become alive to and interested in this other person's objectives, challenges, and needs, right? Because if we don't have that mindset, then our words, our facial expressions, our body language, our tone will betray us, right? So number one, it's creating a way for them to have empathy, to begin to see others as people, not as objects, whether they be clients, customers, coworkers, any of those. And then number two, modeling the right kind of behavior so that they can see how it's done. If we treat them well, much higher likelihood that they'll do the same for our customers.
So true, Nate, and what a thoughtful answer. My thoughts on the topic, if I can add just a couple of things, and they may be somewhat obvious. Your answer was far more in depth, and this is one of the reasons I invited you on here, Nate. I mean, literally, there are a few leaders that I know that analyze as deeply these situations as you, that thinks about them, that thinks about thinks about the root causes and what really happens and why it happens and how do you course correct and how do you interact correctly with your team and with your clients and all that type of stuff. So this has been a ton of fun, but just to offer a couple of other thoughts here for Krista, I think for me that starts from the hiring process, and really if I were being critical, it starts in the establishment of your culture, and then making sure that as you hire that you're finding people that fit your culture. And so you're looking for specific values within those people, specific traits, specific skill sets and knowledge. And for us, for example, we're in a very difficult industry to find technical engineers that have that innate ability to be empathetic with their client. As technical engineers, we tend to be a little bit standoffish, a little bit antisocial, and this is a specific challenge that we deal with. And so we look for the right traits in the hiring process. We make sure that we establish the right culture up front, and that they're educated about that culture even starting in the hiring process, and then as they onboard, and then it's a matter of ongoing training and education and modeling. For us, for example, some of our core values that our culture is based upon that I think are very applicable here is empowered shared leadership, and this idea that every member of our team and everything that they do day in and day out is extremely important, and that interaction that they have with the client, and being able to be empathetic is massively important. Fairness, compassion, and the assumption of positive intent. I think this is how we express empathy. Assuming positive from our clients, having compassion for their situation, whatever that may be, and then proactive, exceptional client care is another one of our core values. And I think that when you build an organization around values, whatever those might be, and you look for the right people that fit into that, for me, that's part of solving the leadership challenges up front, because once you've hired somebody that probably isn't the right fit, then that's when leadership can get really difficult and really challenging, and where you have to really begin to figure out the dynamic with this person. And at some point, while you want to be empathetic, you also have to ask yourself, is it worth months and years of trying to get on the same page with this person? Or do we simply need to, cut ties and let them move on with their career, and we do the same, right? And so those are some of the biggest challenges I've had, in leadership, is when you aren't methodically careful about getting the right people on the right seats in the bus. I think that's Jim Collins,
Yep.
Good to Great, if I'm not mistaken. But when you can do that, and I'm not saying we're perfect at it, but I think we've become really good at it, and 95% of the time we hit it right. And those times that we don't, then you have to kind of really kick in your leadership skills and really figure out how you're going to get on the same page with somebody on your team. So, Nate, we're coming up on the hour here. I think we've got about 5 minutes. Let's do this. Let's see. Oh, well, somebody asked, you mentioned a lot of leadership books today. Can we get a list of those? We'll post those out on social media to this live stream, as well as some of the books that I would recommend. My last question I want to ask you in our last couple of minutes here, Nate, is, and I know you're a prolific reader of Brene Brown's material. I know you really like her, and I do too. Let's talk about clear is kind. This is a Brene Brown philosophy. Tell us about what it's about and why it's important within an organization.
Yeah, we actually kind of adopted some of her language in our second core value, which is humble courage. We say we're brave enough to seek, accept, and deliver feedback. And so this comes from Dare to Lead, which is one of my favorite books by her. She talks about this idea of how much we struggle with giving feedback. And I wanted to really dig in and understand. And so I started asking some of my team leaders, why do we sugarcoat things, or why do we use really ridiculous methods of delivering feedback? Like you've heard of the sandwich method, which is say something nice, give them the feedback, and then say something nice. And kind of like, it's just, that's not clear, right? Like at the end of the day, they're left just wondering.
It's a shit sandwich, by the way.
Yeah. I've always struggled with that as a concept. And so, I say, what Brene Brown says in her book is, she says, clear is kind, unclear is unkind. And I like to think that if we put 10 random people in a room and we said, do you prefer to receive clear feedback or unclear feedback? That everyone would raise their hand and say, I would like clear feedback. But if I put 10 leaders in a room and I say, do you consistently give clear feedback or unclear feedback? Right. I think at the end of the day, most of them are giving unclear feedback, which is to say they're not giving any feedback at all, or they're waiting a long time to give feedback, or when they do finally give it, it's so uncomfortable for them that it's not very clear. And what is at the heart of this is that they want to be liked. They don't want to give feedback and have that person walking away from that conversation not liking them, right? And so we tend to try and make it as soft and fluffy as we possibly can, but that just leads to confusion. Now, what we have to decide is what is more important. I have to decide, is the success of the person that I'm leading more important than my concerns about whether they like me at the end of that conversation? Okay. Now, again, I'm not advocating being a jerk. We've got to make sure that when we're giving clear feedback, right, that we own our part in whatever training didn't happen, or whatever expectations were not reinforced, or whatever follow-up we didn't do, right? But at the end of the day, we've still got to be very clear on what the expectation is and what needs to change. When we do that, when we're clear in our expectations, and again, we do that with that mindset of, I'm alive to and interested in your objectives, challenges, and needs, and with your success being my goal, we're going to sit down and have a conversation about how to help you get better, right? That can be clear and done with an incredible amount of love, okay? But in the absence of that skill, yes, we make it sugar-coated, and it leads to confusion and does not ultimately create the outcome that we're looking for.
So true, Nate. So I know that particularly here, those of us that are based here and do business here in Utah, and I realize many of us do business outside of Utah as well. But I think a lot of us have grown up in the society where we kind of brush under the rug being clear, right? And we don't want to offend anybody, so you don't talk in direct terms. And honestly, that was a massive downfall of my early leadership career, and understanding this concept, that you can actually be kind in the process of being clear. And first of all, you have to make sure your team understand what's expected. You have to train, you have to model, you have to you have to give examples. And then when things don't go right, you talked about it earlier, sit down and ask the question, what went wrong? Did we understand what the expectations were? What did the client expect? What's expected within the company? What went wrong? Why didn't we deliver? Okay, let's, and it doesn't have to be an aggressive, mean process. Just sit down, let's figure it out. Let's get everything out on the table. Okay, I realize that I messed up here. I'm going to own that. do you realize that you messed up here? Can you own that? Let's commit to it. You know, let's move forward together. Let's follow up, right? And so this concept of clearness is kind is super important, and one that when you can nail as a leader, you know, you do so much positive for you and your team and for your clients in the end. So Nate, this has been a fascinating conversation. I really appreciate you dedicating the hour. I appreciate you sharing your wealth of knowledge and wisdom and all of the deep thought and study that you've given to entrepreneurship and to leadership. I know this has been of massive value to those that have attended today. So just thank you again. Thank you for all of our guests for joining us today. Again, I'll be back with my friend, Dr. Jeb Hurley, co-founder, CEO of Xmetrics in January. So keep an eye out on social media for posts on that. And Dr. Jeb and I will be talking about trust and leadership. Nate, thank you again. Everybody enjoy your holidays.
Earl, I'm honored by the opportunity. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
We'll see y'all.